Welcome to Unboxing, Play and Profit for the Gaming Curious. I'm Lane Nooney.
And I'm Joost van Dreunen.
And we're here digging deep on why games matter in today's economy. On the docket today, Friday, August 8th, Yoost's got all the insights on Roblox's quarterly earnings, what Epic's legal win over Google means for the future of Fortnite V-Bucks, and ain't no party like a union worker party. Raven Software just signed their first collective bargaining agreement. All that and more with your two very economically diversified co-hosts. But first, we've got some catching up to do. Quick correction to last week's episode. We said that games like Consume Me and Last Call had been de-indexed by itch.io to appease payment processors. That's not quite right. Consume Me was never de-indexed, and Last Call only disappeared from search if you were logged out of itch, because its developer marked it as sensitive content. Only games tagged NSFW, not safe for work, were actually de-indexed. Thanks to Nolan Filter for bringing this to our attention. Joost,
how's it going?
You're wearing your finest plaids.
I've initiated a glow up period. If that's not naturally happening, then you know what? By all means, I'm going straight to the Walmart and getting an $18 plaid shirt that's blue and pink because sometimes I gotta get ready for the semester. I gotta Labor Day is the beginning of my year in some ways. And so I'm refreshing the inventory.
That's your Q4 or your Q1? Is that what it is?
Pretty much. No, it's like August is like this end of the year spiritual reconciliation. Like you close the books and then come Labor Day, we're back at it. So I'm doing some inventory updates. What about yourself? What's going on? I see you've been at the gym a lot. Is that true?
It is true. I was at the gym this morning. This is not a gym outfit, actually. This is just, I'm wearing more, do they call it athleisure wear? Or kind of like sportswear adjacent clothing as part of my regular routine. One, my biceps are getting too big to fit easily into like a small person's small shirt. So it's like I look like I'm always at the gun show, but that's what I'm going to tell myself.
Late at the gun show. That's fantastic. It's true. It's true. You look diesel.
It's just like you get to a certain size and you just want everything to be roomier,
Are you like taking it serious, like you're counting it out, or you just like, let me just throw these weights around?
Oh no, man. It took me about 2 years to be able to get simultaneously rigorous about my weightlifting and how to support that weightlifting with diet. And now it's just like the system is just self-replicating. So I have a regime, I have like a split I do 3 to 4 times a week. I track all of my weights and sets using an app. I do the same exercises for months at a time before I swap stuff out. And I have a diet that like supports that kind of lifestyle. So I focus on getting like 100 grams of protein a day. And like I track and I like weigh all of my food at home, It's
How many eggs a day?
Eggs are like a bet. Like everyone's like, so much protein. Not really, sir.
Say more.
Because high fat, like the calorie to protein ratio is not as strong. It's like 75 calories in an egg, 5 grams of protein. I'm on like Greek yogurt, turkey, fish. Those are some of my staples. I go to the grocery store, I buy 3 pounds of turkey and I turn it into like 50 turkey meatballs and I eat those for like 2 weeks. And
You're not selling me on this lifestyle.
I don't know. I think it's pretty efficient and I don't have to think about it a lot,
No, I see the efficiency, but it's like, all right, so we're now eating turkey meatballs with yogurt all day. Like, oof.
I mean, I can still like splurge out, but I have a base that, I mean, just like taking the options out of my life was actually great for me. It's
Hmm.
like I don't want to think this much about eating. And so I just learned from tracking what stuff is actually hot, like what is actually meaningfully productive in terms of protein versus isn't, and versus calorie ratio, and then how to kind of optimize the stuff I let be in my kitchen. And listen, I can still eat a Milano cookie at night if I want.
A whole cookie.
A whole cookie, one cookie.
Jeez.
Sometimes maybe a small bowl, maybe 30 grams of Cheez-Its, you know?
I'm in awe. I do appreciate that you've embraced a numeric based lifestyle.
Listen, when I have visible abs in 6 months,
I'm
and
going to
you're
ask you
gonna,
for tips.
and you're not gonna like the answer. Nobody likes the answer. They're like, Lane, how do you do it? And I'm like, well, do you want to buy a food scale? And everyone's like, no, I don't want to buy a food scale. I'm like, well, I don't know what to tell you.
Do you want to eat turkey fish balls with yogurt? No. Like if you wrap them in chocolate, maybe is there some kind of like weightlifting chocolate
They're
option?
perfect. They're perfectly delicious. All right.
I of course joke.
The protein bars are getting good enough that they taste like candy bars. So
Mm. Do you buy the factory ones or you order them like custom?
custom.
Yeah, there's like these places where you can order like protein bars. You can have them like fill out the ingredients. Like some people have like nut
Oh,
allergies and all
that's
kinds of
that's
reasons.
that's real rich people shit. Like it's already expensive enough to buy a protein
Aren't you
bar.
a
I don't.
tenured professor at one of the
Oh
elite
yeah, and God
institutions?
knows they really crack open the salary can when you hit tenure. Do you wanna get into that? My salary bump, 10%. I will get two raises. I mean, I get a sort of annual kind of inflation, whatever, 2%. But you get two meaningful raises your entire career.
Hmm.
Turns out it's it's 10%.
So
I mean,
that covers you for 2 years or so of inflation, and then
it's like,
that's
well,
it.
who the fuck cares? You'll get that. My dean can get that email when I feel like sending it to them. Otherwise, I have to get a competitive counter offer in order to get, and none of that's happening now. The economy's shit, and
Hmm.
higher ed is tanked. So, if you'd like to hire me to consult, I'm available.
Will work for turkey balls.
You gotta listen. Yeah, you gotta really pay for that protein
If
habit.
there's any
I got
kind
a
of
lot of, I got a lot of barbells and Cliff Bars to buy.
all right, that's all I want to know about this.
All right. That's all we need to know about. I'm
But
sure you're having a healthier lifestyle up on the mountain.
it's more limited because there is not much to buy here. It's kind of how I keep track of things. Like so it's just chicken this way, chicken the other way, and some green vegetable. And at that point, like I'm with you. It's like I can't be bothered to think about food all the time. I find it, I love food. I love eating, all that. And also it's like I have like a whole nother person in my life. I don't want to do all that. So I keep it very regimented. Like I like my bowl of fruit with yogurt kind of thing. I like protein. I cut back the carbs a lot. Like it's just like it just puts me to sleep. I'm old or something. So it doesn't really work. And my workout routines, like I like to do the cardio. So I did the cardio at the beginning of the summer. Now that I'm up here, it's easier to do weights. So I try to pursue the gun show that I'm exposed to once a week and try to emulate that more. You know, but it's that like life here is mostly about like sleeping and like breathing clean air and not being around people stressing you out. So like the energy level is real low. That's really the big
Yeah,
breaker.
yeah.
So in that breaker, there's no need to get slouchy. And so while I'm excited to hear about your numeric interpretation of your weight and your diet, another numeric dimension of our life is earnings. And so I expect you to be impressed by this too.
That transition. You expect me to be impressed by that
Listen,
transit? Like, have you listeners? Have you heard of numbers? At the top of today's docket, we're going to be talking about Roblox earnings. Actually, I'm not going to take this transition away from you, Yost. Please tell us
you
more.
already did. You already did. It's fine. It's fine. It's the Lane Show. The gains that Roblox had this quarter will impress you. I'm gonna ride this all the way. I'm gonna do that all the way to the bank. So Roblox came out. That we have earnings that we can discuss. Mostly, it's going to be centered around Roblox because that was the big blowout one. EA is interesting in that context too. We'll talk about them a bit, and then we'll do some Epic because that I mean they didn't have earnings, but they did make some noise and some waves that I think are relevant. So I'll tell you the top line of all of this, which is the big number for everybody was the fact that Roblox has, of course, always something to say about its future. Say like, oh, we're going to make this much money and we're going to have this many users, and they then look. Everybody turns to analysts on Wall Street and they go, okay, let's put a real number on that. They average it out. They call that consensus, and then Roblox came out with their actual numbers and it blew everything away. So they had bookings up 51% year over year, and particularly their daily active users was 112 million, which is just a ridiculous amount of people. If you compare like a PlayStation will have 136 million monthly active users on its network. So the largest console incumbent out there has basically the same range of numbers on a monthly basis.
I
So
mean,
it's
yeah,
wild.
I want to underscore because like I don't you say a bit a 3 digit number with a millions after. I'm like I don't know what that means. That's like 1/3 the population of the United States,
Yes.
and these are global numbers, right? But like that's do we? I'll let you go. I'll save my questions.
Listen, like, it's a lot, and so the big
It's a lot.
it's a lot of people. It's one of your three friends is playing Roblox, whether they admit to it or not. As a Dutchman, it's roughly like 8 times the entire population of the Netherlands. So it's I can slice it any which way you want, but it's a huge amount. But the symbolic threshold here was that the last earnings they had 98.5 million, and everybody was sort of looking at that 100. Can they break it? Can they not break it? And then bam, they blew right through it. So that was a big to do. Everybody was excited about that. The overall engagement hours jumped 58%. So they're adding users in effect, right? And the explanation for all that was in a simple way that there's this new viral hit called Grow a Garden, which I know you don't play, but let me just run the loop.
Rude. I'm busy growing a garden in real life, but go
Yes,
on.
your gun garden. It's the see, most of it comes down to like basically you grow vegetables and then you harvest them, you sell them, you get money with which you buy seeds.
It's Farmville.
It's a
It's
farmville, but it's
Farmville
for
in
kids.
Roblox.
And it sort of loops. And my 12-year-old explained it to me, and he drew a bunch of squiggly lines. He's like, "It's so boring. It's so boring." But all of his friends play it, and apparently, some insane number of people have started playing. So it has 13. So I say it was a 22 million concurrents at its peak. It's just an insane amount of money that's flowing into this one viral hit. And if you look past like all the big numbers, say, wow, so many big numbers, that's so exciting. But what it does, it proves the mechanics of Roblox as a platform able to cultivate its own organic hits, if you will, right? Rather than
Mhm.
relying on external people pushing their stuff onto its platform, like you see in Fortnite, where you have all these Marvel characters, etc. That's also a great model, and we could talk about that. But Roblox is now generating its own virality, if you will, in the same way that like a social media platform or like a YouTube would do too, where all of a sudden you can't afford to miss this anymore. So it becomes this sort of front line in like popular culture. And that's attracting subsequently all this attention, not just from investors, of course, but also from other kids that are getting paid now to build stuff. So the developer exchange fees are up quarter over quarter. They've reached something like $360 million total, which is substantial. They're gunning for like $1 billion in payouts for this year alone, which is up from 800 million or so from last year. So you see this user generated content generation kind of rise up. It's attracting all this audience momentum and therefore advertisers. And so that's the big thing with Roblox. It's like unbelievably growing and sort of beyond everybody's expectations. Those are some gains, Lane. You must envy this. This is all new information. I realize.
A little back of the phone math. So, revenue payout to creators compared to overall bookings for the quarter hovering at about 20%.
Mhm.
Do we think that's a good ratio?
Well, compared to what? Right?
Well, do we think that's an equitable ratio?
Okay. So are you saying are these kids driving traffic for Roblox getting their fair share?
Yeah, that's one question I'm asking.
Yeah, of course there's always a labor question, and the answer is I spoke to a few people about this. I do think it's the consensus is yes, and I didn't talk to Roblox people about it. Of course, they seem to think so too. And you remember we did an interview with their head of economy last year, and their emphasis seems to be sort of genuinely to make the platform so that people get the paid the most. What I'm tempted to add here, as expected, is the fact that Roblox is under pressure. So the earnings are good, but they're still running a loss. They have a 280 million net loss for the quarter, and a large part of that has to do with platform fees. You know, they're investing in infrastructure, they're investing in all these things, and also then have to give 30% of most of their income away, to Apple and Google, because most of these kids will be playing on mobile devices. So
Oh.
so there's a bit
Mm.
of a, as a
So they're
content provider,
losing. Interesting. So are those bookings not including that 30% cut, or is that after?
that is a good question. That bookings means the big number. And so the net loss is sort of after it's all said and done, they
But
come up
don't
short.
they never see that? Because it's not like they get that money and then 30% is taken back. They just never have it, right?
They So bookings, kind of depending on how you slice it, but so the reason the industry shifted to bookings is because it's a much larger number up front. But when you book something, it doesn't mean it's materialized. So if I buy $10 worth of credits and then it sits in my account, I've spent my $10. So the booking was $10, but
Yeah.
now I still get to spend it, and so you haven't actually performed the transaction or the payout with it. And so I'm not an accounting person at all, but it's basically, it becomes sort of written down money, and then it transacts in the future. And so rather than
Mm.
waiting to figure that out, they just go with the big number up front.
Oh, interesting. So it's plausible that that 1.44 is knocked down to under a bill once you look at bookings, and then
Hmm.
that would mean the percentage that creators are getting is significantly higher, or percentage
Yes.
of overall. Because basically you're telling me that they're pulling in that much money, but in terms of they're actually like 200 mil short in terms of balancing their books.
Yes.
Woof.
So 1.44 billions in bookings, which is up 51% year over year. 316 million is up 52% year over year for developer payouts, so the creator
Okay.
economics. But then in the end, they still post a net loss of 280, which
So
is,
how long can that go on? I mean, I get,
hmm, hmm.
strong cash flow generation, but you can't not make money forever, right? And this
That's
has
it.
been going on for, I mean, Roblox, it feels like a new company because it's been big
Hmm.
for a short period of time, but it's actually been around quite a while.
It's been around since 2004.
Yeah.
So
It's
this thing
almost
is
20 years
older
old.
than,
It's
you know
I
many
mean,
veterans.
you know, the NBA, WNBA isn't much older than that, and if they can't make a profit, I'm not sure why Roblox deserves to.
The WNBA hobby horse makes its appearance. It's true. So the problem here is, I see. So like, sort of on the face of it, it's the platform fees, like I mentioned more broadly. And this is the big sort of a source of ambivalence. On the one hand, I see this as like a creative space, a digital playground. And I think that there is some, merits with regards to like literacy and like sort of being good and sort of navigating and being social online. And I think that there's a lot to say for it. On the flip side of that, of course, it's the conversation around like, okay, well, this is platform logic 101. So with 112 daily active users and the CEO for Roblox saying we want to capture a billion people and we want to be 10% of the total games industry, so call it $20 billion, they still have to 5x this thing. That is only possible if you grow it like a platform, right? And so it's a platform inside of a platform economy,
Is
and
there
that
any part of the game industry that is 10% of the game industry?
if
Any platform or company?
Tencent is 30, Sony is 25, Microsoft is now 25 billion. So that's the range of companies. Then it drops off pretty quickly. Like a Nintendo is like 9 billion.
Yeah, with the exception that none of those that you just listed are dominantly game companies. Like games are one part of Sony, Microsoft, Tencent. Games are not actually their primary business.
For Tencent, it's 33%. For Sony, it's 30% of total revenue. So that's big enough for me. Like for Microsoft, it's like 7.
But
Um,
these are not game exclusive companies. That's what
no,
I'm
no,
saying.
completely.
Whereas, right, I
That's right.
mean,
That's right.
they're doing Tencent is doing telecom. Microsoft is still
Hmm.
fucking making an operating system. Last I checked, that is certainly more important than Xbox.
Hmm. Hmm.
Right? Sony is an entertainment company, and once you start looking at companies that only make games or
Yes,
even just games and hardware, those numbers drop precipitously, right? Like,
correct.
when does Roblox run out of room in that space?
That's actually the question. Like, how many kids are there in the first of all,
How
and
many children?
and of course the argument that they're making is like we're aging up, as they say so
Yeah,
eloquently. It's like they try to capture older players, which in and of itself seems like a reasonable thing. It's also the platform is maturing a little bit in terms of content. Like it's not as kiddie as more as it was. Sometimes these things start that way and then kind of just get older in terms of audience. Kids are also growing up. And some just stick with the platform. So for all those reasons, I think that the age is creeping up, and I think that that puts them in a position where also advertisers will have a lot to say about this, and so maybe that's an additional revenue stream that allows them to get there. That would ostensibly be new revenue, so it's not that they capture 10% of total of existing, but it would be 10% of total plus whatever new
revenue that
brands.
previously was not accessible to the game
Exactly,
industry.
exactly. So that's the sort of Roblox fanfare. It's interesting because it keeps growing. Like they had expected, the sort of naysayers and skeptics say, like, well, there's a lot of issues around trust and safety, and that is true. I believe that those, as a dad, I have to be on the side of caution here. So, like, yeah, let's just,
Yeah, unfortunately, trust and safety issues have been so externalized to users that they seem to have very little impact on the profitability of a modern tech company. We're all kind of stuck with a certain set of platforms, even when we don't trust them or find them safe,
Mhm.
right? And the fact is, like, most parents are not actually, I think, paying that much attention, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I do think so. There's a growing degree of scrutiny coming from parents. There's like this sort of movement going on.
There's a growing degree. I mean, like, let's extrapolate that out to every kid in the United States who's playing Roblox. Do I think all of their parents are even one aware? I mean, there is I
Hmm.
would say, probably demographic but loud minority
Hmm.
of parents that are willing to make and understand how the levers work to make a fuss about this, right?
Hmm.
But, like, we don't have anything resembling accurate statistics of how many parents actually even know what the fuck their kids are doing on their computer, right?
Yes, which is a fair assessment completely, and also sort of the nature of the problem is that my experience is like iPads tend to be these sort of like easy babysitters, and the most
Yeah,
cynical way to put it.
yeah,
But we're also I'm a parent in a generation of parents that just fucking overprotects their children. They're on top of these kids, like so the degree to which children don't have a lot of breathing room, and or more practically to the extent that they're free time outside of school isn't already fully pre-programmed with like extracurricular activities and like whatever thing you can do to build your resume at age 4 to get into Goldman Sachs once you graduate somewhere. Like I mean, it's just absurd. Like I remember just being bored as a child. That's been
yeah.
completely
Remember when they
eradicated.
told you, your parents just told you, go outside when they
Yeah,
wanted to be
piss
left
off,
alone?
don't come in the house, get out of here.
Yeah, that's how I wound up almost getting bitten by a snake. My mother was like, "Go outside."
Hmm. Well, I mean, you probably said something to that snake too, and like knowing you probably pissed off the snake.
Gave it a face. Yeah,
It's a shift in parental sort of ideology or the habits and practices has been remarkable. I think it's interesting contextually that we have remote education, we work from home and do Zoom calls, but then like play has to be offline, or is that supposed to be online? We're not talking about that enough. I have over the last year or two kind of come into the fold with like the whole anxious generation argument from Jonathan Haidt at Stern. I'm working on a few things with his research center now, but there is a broader set of people going like, "Hey, wait a minute," and gaming is in the research not directly linked as like a problematic kind of behavior compared to say social media. Social media, that's
yeah,
really sort of like the pits of it all, but you end up like you have to have some habit changes to make that work, right? And so that's
yeah.
where Roblox finds itself at the center.
I mean, Hate is the co-author on a piece that just dropped on the Atlantic 2 days ago, and usually I don't like to pay that much attention to the Atlantic, but the article was what kids told us about how to get them off their phones, and it seems like the thesis of the article is precisely what you're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
which is that kids, they would prefer to meet face to face, but because of they're either overscheduled or there's literally nowhere for them to go, right? So there's
Mm-hmm.
like a third spaces argument, right? Is that
Mm-hmm.
they like everything has been corporatized to the point where there is nowhere free for kids to hang out. I think particularly as they get older, without being surveilled, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or being perceived as being a nuisance or causing a problem or whatever.
Completely agree. It's
So
a
they defect to spending time online, you
mhm.
know.
It's also like you have to. I mean, I don't want to pull the parent card, but it's like when kids come home from school, like they're fucking toast. Like they're totally unmanageable. They're tired. They've been running around, and so it's like, what else? It's and then they're gonna get a bike and go to some playground a mile away to go do what? They're gonna want to sit on the couch and just kind of veg out like any reasonable human wants to do.
Yeah.
And if and it's sort of like one of the things I'm working on to get around this out. It's like I've been looking at like playgrounds, and what's been happening is like you see a nominal increase in playgrounds around major metropolitan areas, but when you look a little deeper, it's mostly relabeling of schoolyard playgrounds. And so
Huh.
so in other words, as the population grows, the number of playgrounds isn't growing with them,
Mm.
which is explainable through all these other ways, of course. But it's you're basically not investing in third spaces in a physical sense. And so then
Yeah.
the default becomes iPads, etc., which is good, in terms of getting people to spend more time at home and watch TV and on their iPads, and also necessarily raises questions with regards to safety and a healthy play environment online. So I think these are all very pertinent things, but Roblox sits at the middle of that. At the same time, as they get bigger, I think the conversation will become louder and wider. So I think that that's a benefit to it as well.
Interesting.
So,
Interesting. I mean, I'm generally turned off by platform ambition of this scale, this sort of like the monster that has to eat everything
mhm.
in order to become profitable. I think it creates, I think it's anti-competitive. I think it creates unhealthy ecosystems. I think it's really high cost for to transition out. Right, those are all things I don't like, and it seems to I think it benefits the owners more than the workers, etc. But what's the analogy here? Is this the Uber of games? Is it the, not in terms of the service being provided, but the inflationary scale at which the platform has to dominate
Mhm.
in
Yeah.
order for it to be a success?
So
On, and let's put success in quotes, kind of on its own economic terms.
you could say Uber. It's like there's sort of a scale of cynicism here, though. Like that's on the more cynical side. You could say metaverse. That's sort of perhaps like the more idealistic, hopeful side, where all the investors go like, and from the playground, maybe they'll go get an online job somewhere or whatever. You remember this? You're the
What?
historian here. In Second Life, when you were not playing, you could make your avatars dance around a certain area, and then the area owner would pay you to show traffic numbers. And so you'd have these people basically passively making money by having their avatars be the sort of part of this real life 3D billboard for a bank or some company. So, that was 2000, and so now 25 years later, you start to see the investors go like, hey, we can also then have some things that maybe pay something. And we had this during the pandemic. So they see it as like this economic foundation, maybe an educational component to a metaverse, and this would be a precursor to all of that. I'm
Oh,
squarely.
all of that sounds even worse. Oh
I
my
know. Are
god.
you excited? Aren't you excited? And so I'm more in the middle of all this. It's like, look, like my kids need to learn to navigate this themselves, and I find the reference to like YouTube most closely
Hmm.
practical for
Yeah.
me. It's like,
Yeah.
look,
Okay.
is there great value on YouTube? Absolutely. I watch that shit for hours every day and learn so much. My kids do too. My 4-year-old asked me this morning, it's like, what's a cricket? To YouTube we go, right? We just like it's just instantly there. And also, Nazis at blah 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 blah. Right. So it's like so
What's a cricket?
you know well, she's been hearing them here upstate, and she's like she was the question was really, what does a cricket eat? And so then you kind of
Okay.
start at
Okay.
101 and off you go.
All right.
My point to say is like that's my so you
This
have
poor urban child who's never heard of cricket before. Like,
well she's been living in the basement with the windows closed, so we don't want her exposed to anything. We don't want her to get any kind of like liberal ideas in
yeah.
Brooklyn, you
Okay.
know.
Okay. YouTube is an interesting.
So that's
Yeah.
my sort of
Yeah.
middle ground, right,
Okay.
between Uber and like the metaverse. We'll see. It will probably like these things have a moment in the sun and then they fall apart for all these reasons. Like
Yeah.
whatever we could talk about that too. But Roblox currently seems to be one of the hot spots for growth, for excitement.
No, I'm
Travis,
sure this made every investor on Wall Street pop one. You know what I mean? Like,
well, let me
come
tell
on.
you exactly how much it popped. So I did a overview in my newsletter this week, but just I wanted to count it out. So what analysts do, they set price targets for the shares. So company will say we think the share for Roblox, the share price can go to a certain value. So for instance, Deutsche Bank initially thought, oh, it's going to be $80 a share, $82 a share. After earnings, they bumped it up to $130. And so across the board, on average, you see an increase from about 107 as a price target for the Roblox shares to $150, so 40%
Wow.
increase.
Okay.
So Wall Street is on
Damn.
board, they're ready, and this suggests more momentum in the future, obviously.
Yeah.
So we'll see
Yeah.
where that gets us.
But it's a long road. It's a real long road
Well,
to seeing if they can pull off what the stated aspiration is.
Well, yes. And so the final data point in that regard is like when it went public in March 2021, the share started around $62, then hit a high in November of $135. And with this news, they hit a new high of
Yeah.
$138, right? So it's a big smiley face of a graph, a big U shape. Because after that they collapsed under $50 for most of the time, and then slowly in the recent months with successes like Grow a Garden, etc., back to this like new record high. So they have the ball on their court, right? It's interesting to see what they'll do next.
All right. Fascinating. I know you've got some other earnings tucked up your sleeve, but I think maybe we should. Do you want to talk about those next week and we move on to.
There will be more earnings next week too.
There will
Yes.
be more earnings net. We can talk dollars, dollars, dollars all day long for the next couple weeks. This happens every time there's earnings. I'm like, ugh, it's like 3 weeks of this.
Somebody's got
And
to pay rent around here, Lane.
but what about this news out of the Epic Games v Google antitrust case? I was very engaged by this. I was particularly struck by the fact that this was not broadly covered in the games press.
Hmm, hmm.
And I do think, I mean, part of that is the shelling of games journalism in general. On The Verge, it was tagged under tech and policy, I think, and
Hmm.
maybe one other thing. But this a lot of this, the smaller outlets, this just didn't really, for all of the anti-capitalist gnashing of the teeth, this kind of real material stuff, which is that Google just lost its appeal in the Epic Games antitrust case, meaning the Play Store has been officially ruled an illegal monopoly.
Hmm.
That this did not garner many headlines in the games press.
I think it's such a cool story.
It's fascinating, and understanding how this is different from Apple.
It's just like it's so there's the economics and we can talk about the cultural impact, but just I love hearing people talk about this to kind of like and sort of disclose their mindset. So you have the judge. So the you're absolutely right. So the Ninth Court of Appeals will not overturn the unanimous jury verdict from 2023, which stated that Google had basically made its app store and payment system an illegal monopoly, like you say, right? And so
Yep.
what they did was spend basically a shit ton of money to incentivize their top publishers to not embrace or employ or instruct their users to use alternative payment methods. In other words, go through our platform, we take our fee, and here's some money for you. What that does is, of course, creates an unfair structure to everybody not getting money from Google. So they're subsidizing the winners, which is sort of a classic
Well,
thing that platform holders do.
the argument for Google's monopolistic behavior dominantly falls on its revenue sharing deals with the phone makers and its anti-steering policies,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? Rather than, so the kickbacks that we're talking about, right? So basically, they discourage phone makers from using rival stores using their mobile application distribution agreement. So in some cases, a company like Samsung is getting sometimes a 20 to 30% kickback of app and in-store app purchases in exchange for being pre-installed
Hmm.
and to avoid promoting rival app stores. So
Hmm.
yeah, they're paying the phone manufacturer, right, to sideline competition, and then the anti-steering policies which you bring up, which basically means, and this is what happened to Epic in Fortnite, right? You put a link for a user to be able to buy the stuff, to buy their V Bucks outside of this system, and we will boot you out of the store entirely,
Yep.
right?
It's our way or the highway, right? Simply put. And
Yeah.
so, what I like then is to hear a judge after all this say the following. Right, this is a quote. It's like, "In the world of adrenaline-fueled survival that epitomizes the video game Fortnite, winners are decided in blazes of destruction and glory. By contrast, the outcome of this case, centered on Fortnite's developer Epic Games and the Google Android platform, turns on long-standing principles of trial procedure, antitrust, and injunctive remedies." It's just you could just write a whole paper on this quote alone. It's just fantastic. Like, this lady is clearly spent all of 6 seconds playing Fortnite and this adrenaline fueled survival that epitomizes the. It's just beautiful. It's just so much fun for me. So
What are you reading from? The judge in this case was a guy, John Donato.
it's Judge M. Margaret McCown in her opinion on the Ninth Court Circuit panel.
Okay.
I'm reading from The Verge in this case directly,
Okay.
but so my my pointer goes towards the mindset of that people bring to this is like you have it's sort of like a classic conversation in gaming that the people that tend to regulate or shape policy or have some opinion about it are the people that play the least. We had the same thing back in the day. Dimitri Williams wrote about this, about how people in government would basically put Doom and Myst in the same bucket as first person games. And so therefore they were all evil. Like, Myst is not at all like Doom, but whatever. And so I like that's had somewhat changed, but people are still stretching their mind a little bit to understand exactly what it's like. Google tried to appeal and they lost that appeal, and so that's the big win for Epic now. That Tim Sweeney, the David against the Google Goliath, is now basically over. He started all this on purpose, and he won it sort of fair and square, but also convincingly. And that's a really important signal for the larger mobile app and sort of platform ecosystem.
I mean, I don't really think it matters that she doesn't play like who like that's not what any of this is about, right?
I
Or
disagree. I disagree.
determination about whether or not this is a monopoly is irrelevant to the products being sold in it, right?
Oh, look,
Um,
you don't have to be an Uber passenger or driver to understand the mechanics. I'm saying I just love hearing people from outside the industry speak about the industry. It's like this sort of like this dramatized adrenaline fueled survival. I don't. Do you play games like that? I don't know.
I mean, I think the game makers certainly like to talk about their games like that, so I don't
Mhm.
really think it's that far of a stretch, right? Or that she's, or that it indicates much of anything, because that's absolutely how the companies that produce this stuff speak about themselves.
I love hearing those things. I love hearing this. So in retort to the outcome of all this, of course, Google had a lot to say, including, quote, "This decision will significantly harm user safety, limit choice, and undermine innovation." And so they seem to also not be playing any of the games. So it's just it's such a like black and white thing in so many ways, but they keep going. The regulatory affairs people are just relentless in that sense. Talk
I mean,
about adrenaline fueled legislation. Oh no, all right, I'll
I
let it go.
think one of the important things to highlight here, right, is that when Epic takes this case against Apple, they mostly lose. Right?
Hmm.
They get a few concessions. They're allowed to link out, but now Apple is going to do some sort of, disgusting backdoor charges.
Hmm.
But they're able to it's the same principles, but what causes the difference in the ruling is the fact that with Apple, it's that closed ecosystem, which really is code for they own the hardware and the software, right? Whereas Google cannot make that same argument. Google is just, we make an OS. And so it was about the restrictions they were placing on hardware develop manufacturers to prevent other stores from existing in that OS that was the monopolistic conduct, right? That is, both companies engaged in anti-steering policies, but the reason the revenue share stuff mattered and resulted in a materially different outcome is that Google is not also in control of the hardware that the phone that the operating system rides on, right? That if they're going to claim they have an open playground, then they have to let other people sell snacks at the playground. I think that's the principle.
Agreed. That is one of the more pivotal cases in this decade, and I think it's going to be, for all the. I mean, you bring this up at the beginning, but if you think about or during the conversation about Roblox, but when you think about these platform economies in terms of like Uber, right, and say, that's the big bad wolf over here. To make sense of that and to make progress in that, we turn to the games industry. Like it's the linchpin that's changing the tides here a little bit, right? It ends up being a conversation that's made tangible as well as effectual, and it's coming from interactive entertainment. It's not coming from these other categories. While the research
Yeah.
around it has been like very forthcoming, there's a lot of academic and commercial research that's pointing towards all of this. The logic is there. The people in finance are looking at it seriously because they know that it moves the needle in a big way. The regulators take a serious look, and where you see progress and change is from games. So that's of course sort of our way to connect all this. But it's a fascinating moment. This is the AT&T divestiture of our generation.
I mean, it's going to have, breaking open the Android app economy, delivering cheaper in-app experiences, more choice, alternative app stores. That those will all be consumer outcomes, right? And what you'll also begin to see then is inherently a price differential between what you'll pay for apps on an Android versus what you'll pay for apps on an Apple device,
Hmm,
right?
hmm. Understood.
So that competition will have interesting knock-on effects. For big tech, this confirms that US courts are going to police platform monopolies. This is a big win for studio services. And there's interesting, I don't know, I was like, what do we think of the probability of a Valve mobile app store at this moment, I was like,
Did you?
we could begin to see some funky innovation in the entrance to this space. Consumers are not really going to see any changes in their experience of their phones until I think 2026. But Google's opposition to this is self-serving nonsense. Like, I'm sure this is annoying for them to have to manage, but like, you know, and
Yeah.
it is part of this kind of tangled. I mean, it's such a weird moment politically and geopolitically where we like two things are simultaneously true. We are ruled by an oligarchy that is composed of tech elites, right? That control our politics, that control our news cycles, that control our access to free speech. And there is this like extremely bumpy road on which kind of different which governments are trying to wrangle with corporate power and user autonomy in different ways. So we could look at something this being coherent with something like the UK's Online Safety Act, the EU's DMA enforcement, other kinds of app store regulation, that there's tremendous dissatisfaction with the outcomes that these platforms have produced, even as they ever more successfully, I would say, assert their power and control.
Interesting. I agree with the sentiment. I think I would rephrase it slightly, but it's true. If industrialization changed the economic underpinnings of let's say, the Western markets, I think digitalization and platformization did the same thing. You know, all of this just grew faster than we made rules around it, like labor laws, like what's fair for consumers. How do you curb monopolies or oligopolies?
I would not defer the equity of outcomes as a pure byproduct of growth, right? Like these are like it has been choices and investments
Hmm.
of capital
Hmm.
to ensure we have the kind of labor system we have today. Like,
Yes.
I think there's a really problematically neutralizing effect to simply say it grew faster than we knew what to do. And it's like, who was making sure that lobbyists were getting the tax breaks that they wanted and that these people were getting reductions in the capital gains tax that they wanted, right? That was all done and with tremendous intent, right? I would not remove the actual choices and will, right, of the sort of economic elite class out of that equation.
No,
It's simply
100%.
appealing to the some sort of inherent growth model of technological
Oh
progress.
no, no, I reject that model. I think that all too often we stare down into this magical box that gets us nothing. The I think I think the economic foundation of today resembles, but is deeply different than say a century ago. And what you do, for instance, you have like the Sherman Act and all these like sort of monopolistic tools and regulatory policies that were formulated and defined a century ago that you now apply to a platform economy, and it doesn't quite work. Like this is the sort of whole up and coming of Lena Khan when she wrote the Amazon paradox, right? It's like basically like, okay, so is it against human consumer benefit? Is are we harming consumers when a large platform company with multiple industries and stakes is subsidizing one to basically drown out competitors by leveraging a profit margins from another category that it's very successful in? And so it becomes a very different kind of ecosystem, and it needs new rules. And what you start to see with these epic wins against Apple, against Google, and otherwise is that we're at the beginning of formulating some guardrails against why this matters and how we should think about it differently, right? To scrutinize some of the rules, some of these platform fees, things like parity, etc., that are guiding principles in platform economies that all of them seem to do collectively, each in their own way, but at some they all take on the same position. And over time, it starts off like a great way. At the end, shitification is real, and then over time it gets worse. And at some point somebody has to step in and say, okay, look, we can't keep doing it like this. There has to be some kind of dead stop because it becomes an invasive species that eats everything.
What does a cricket eat?
What does a cricket eat? Let's talk about owns and pawns.
You got a pwn for this week?
Oh, so I'm so pony. That's not how you say it.
That's, I mean, I'm so pony a thing people say?
This is the 4-year-old also watches My Little Pony a lot, so and I agree, for reference with Gabe Newell, that Pinky Pony is the best one. And my pwn this week, because I want you to end on an own, is that EA shut down several of its Forever games.
Oh, which ones?
It's like old ones, like Simpsons Tapped Out, shutting down. Not,
That Let me
it's
fire up the old Google on that one.
yeah, so that's money lost. But they've, they're basically like turning off like Need for Speed Rivals,
A
Madden,
city
NFL.
building mobile game based on the American media franchise of The Simpsons. I hardly knew ye. All right.
That was a huge one. That was one of their big like mobile successes. So that's been discontinued, but like the new additions have been like FIFA 23, Madden NFL 21, 22, and so these
So
games.
they're making it impossible for people to play the old edition of these games almost
Mhm.
immediately.
Yes, well, there's some
Oof.
timeline they sunsetted and say so. FIFA 23 shut down on December 12th. You know, and it's like Need for Speed Rivals shutting down, and it's look, if you've spent money and time in these games and now suddenly it's gone. I mean, this is against the background of like a growing chorus of people disagreeing with this practice. you know is it fair to keep these things going? There's probably some licensing stuff here that's going on too, and it's probably expensive. I get it. And also that's really salty, so that's a
Yeah.
pwn for me. I dislike that
Yeah.
very much.
Do you think there's any, I mean, cuz part of it is to, to play a game like FIFA, right? I
Mm.
mean, I mean, you're loot boxing, to have that game be any fun, right?
Mhm.
I'm not just thinking of the mobile version, right? To play the console, you're putting an enormous, you're spending money to buy assets and stuff that will actually directly impact your play experience, right? This isn't
Mhm.
like buying skins in Fortnite or something. I mean, remember when we thought NFTs were going to solve this problem so that you could have persistent value in
Listen, I'm still waiting for NFTs to solve any problem,
any problem?
any at
It,
all.
it
Whenever you're
it
ready.
does really suck. Could you just give somebody a coupon even, or would that be more insulting? Like you've
Well,
spent
can I
five
transfer like
hundred dollars. Yeah, could I transfer the credit worth
can I
of
get
what I
store
already spent
credits? Yes,
on future stuff? I mean, I'm sure that would create a
or
kind of
some
economic
devalued credit,
inflation.
right?
Yeah,
Give me
yeah,
$200 for my $500 because I did get to play this whole time.
yeah.
But like, don't just like
But
it's like last call. See you later. You're like,
they're like money pump, like they're just fucking trying to get the last drop out of the well.
so I have to assume that it's some business reason because like probably like they discontinued with FIFA, so that's probably part of it
Yeah.
too. But you know, it's just EA's not afraid to make unpopular decisions. Because they do it all the time, and it's the discontinuation of these like forever games. They're not forever.
So
They're
this is also
for
exactly what the stop killing games quote unquote movement. I don't really want to use the term movement around that, but that is the interest or the agenda of that project, right? Is that these games should at least be able to be kind of tied off in some way that allow them to be kind of fan maintainable, you
hmm
know.
No, I totally agree.
All right. Yeah,
So
that's a
so cheer
bummer.
me up.
I
Cheer me up
not
with this.
Okay,
Get
so let me tell you about a great thing that happened as quickly as I can. So, welcome to the unionization fold, Raven Software. So, Raven Software's 19-person QA team just ratified their first union contract with Microsoft 3.5 years after forming the first AAA game studio union. So it happened when they were still owned by Activision Blizzard. Activision Blizzard was a real blowhard about this. They engaged in a lot of kind of union busting practices. And so that's why, even though Raven really kicked off this kind of wave of unionization that we see in game development companies in the United States. And so even though they were first, it has taken them they were not even though they were first to unionize, they were not the first to get a ratified contract with Microsoft. That was ZeniMax that did that just a month or two ago. We talked about that on this episode or on this podcast. So this is great. This is a historic first contract. It's very well deserved. It includes 10% a 10% raise, limits on mandatory overtime, preserves options for remote work, and this is we continue to see a larger trend within the game industry. Even though it can't prevent layoffs, it does mean that they have to pay severance to
hmm
employees who get laid off. So the more of this, the better. Good work, guys. Way to stay the course, because I think it can't be overstated how much they were the guinea pig for this entire thing in the industry, right? And so, well, fucking earned, everybody.
Big up.
Hook up.
All
All right.
right.
Well, with that, we got more earnings next week
More
because it's that
gains.
more gains. It's that time of year. I'm sure something else stupid will happen in the game industry, and we'll talk about it all here. I'm packing it for you on unboxing. Good night and good game.